Okay, so are we good to start now?
We are good to start.
Right. Thank you so much. Sorry for all the technical glitches that have occurred, but it's okay. Technology betrays and sometimes it just happens. But yeah, thank you for joining us today at this webinar. We're trying to evaluate and explore the idea of the scientific genius and the consequences that come out from such a construction. We are supported very generously by the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, and we hope that this webinar is a fun and intriguing journey for all of us. A couple of things as to why we wanted to organize this webinar is, the journey starts, I think, somewhere in 2019 when I first heard Geeta, who's here with us today, speak about the work that she was doing on the construction of the scientific genius at Pressing for Progress, which was a conference that was organized in the University of Hyderabad by the Gender in Physics Working Group. I was, of course, intrigued by the idea, and Geeta used a particular word in her talk called the construct of the scientific genius. And that's when I started wondering that if it is a construct, which probably and technically means that it's something that is maintained and created by collective belief and action. So I wondered as to what are those beliefs and actions that culminate into the understanding of scientific genius. I went out in the world and I wandered, I explored and found no answer. Then I started looking around for scientific geniuses around me, and I realized that the scientific geniuses that we have now around me are so different from the background that I come from the identities that I come from. So in this, what I did was I started looking at, I started asking people as to what is it that goes into the making of a scientific genius, and I again found no answer. And I realized that a good talk often, the result of a good talk is that it raises more questions than it answers. So these are the questions that I started with. Thankfully, the TLOS team, when I joined the TLOS team, looks like they independently had also thought of organizing a similar event, and our interests matched very well, and here we are. So the topic right now, as you might understand, is very little discussed in the context of this country, and so we're just trying to raise very basic questions as well as questions that intrigue all of us as to who is a scientific genius, what is a scientific genius, what goes into making of a scientific genius. And hopefully through these questions we'll be able to question both the nature of sciences, which is what science is, and the culture of sciences, which is how science is done. That's the ultimate goal of this discussion, and we hope that our panelists today will be able to guide us through this process. So our panelists today are Geeta and Shalini, Geeta Chadda and Shalini Mahadev. Geeta is a sociologist in the University of Bombay. Her research spans science studies, feminist theories, art practices, and post-colonial studies. She co-edited 2 volumes on feminists and science, and more recently, Reimagining Sociology in India, Feminist Perspectives. Shalini's a PhD scholar at the University of Hyderabad. She's currently trying to complete a PhD in neuroscience. Besides this, she indulges in making sense of the world, its people, and other whatnots. She also loves to talk and notice science in everyday life. Without further ado, Geeta, I'll leave this over to you. Please enlighten us with the basics about the topic, and please put it in context for us. Thank you.
Yeah, enlighten is the last thing we will explore together. Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, this has become a usual tagline of webinar. Can you hear me? That's my identity. Anyway, so thank you very much, the Life of Sciences, for actually organizing this session. Thank you, Nandita, Ashima, and then. Yeah, and I'm extremely happy to be here with the Life of Science because I've been admiring their work for quite a while now. And as I was telling Shantanu the other day, it's probably the only work group in India which identifies itself as a feminist approach to science. So very happy to be here. Thank you very much. Now, let's start with asking the question. That's the way I'd like to put it. 10 minutes is too short as time, but let me try. So why is this question an important one? This question of who or what constitutes a scientific genius. Yeah, and I think in itself it's a very fascinating question in terms of how do some human beings show a certain ability, a certain talent, a certain potential to be marked as special from others. It's a very complex question with psychology, biology, various disciplines have tried to explore. It's a vast canvas. While the question is important in itself, I think for us, it's also very important because it seems like in the last 20-30 years that social sciences might have destabilized this question, but the presence exists in the scientific communities as a self-definition, and also the public discourse around science, the meta-narrative around science, which is also a part of how nations project this. So very often you ask someone what do they take national pride in, and the intelligentsia, the middle class, or whoever will tell you the number of Nobel Prizes that India has got or not got. Yeah, so it is a very important question, therefore, because it is present. And I think the third and the more important thing for us was that if we want to look at the project of science and we want to try and make it less hegemonic, we want to make it more inclusive, we want to make it more participatory, then this question becomes crucial, because I think that this idea and the construction of scientific genius does present hurdles to that project, and I think we need to critically engage with that. Let me quickly take a quick glance at the etymology and the history of the idea of genius, and we will, even our initial readings will tell us that the idea of genius in a way came from the idea of a spirit, or something or somebody or some force between the gods and human beings, which was termed as genius in pre-modern Western cultures, which was a force which would guide, attendant spirit, which would guide people, places, groups to beget success. This is associated with the male force, yeah, which would contribute to begetting of great success and achievement and do what you need to do. As this transitions into modernity and with the birth of modern Western science, what we see happening is that with the growth of individualism, capitalism, utilitarianism, Darwinism, a combination of these sort of seeds this idea of the genius, which was earlier external, and makes it internal to the individual, right? So what happens here is that it becomes an individual internal attribute, something which is innate ability, the innate ability of an individual to do this or that, driven by their own forces, biological, psychological, whatever it is, and aimed at inevitable success. I mean that it will, whatever it does, it will be successful, right? Inevitable, imminent success and eminence. So it's very interesting how this idea of the individual, the idea of the innate ability, and the idea of inevitable eminence becomes a part of the construction of the genius in Western modernity. It pans differently in the arts, it pans differently in the sciences, but we'll stick to the sciences and we'll talk about how this leads to a certain genius culture in science. Yeah, even if you are not a genius, you're surrounded by this genius culture, which comes through either the discourse of merit, which comes through either a discourse of excellence, which comes through a discourse of success, all of that. Yeah. So this highly talent-based and eminence-based discourse starts becoming the norm of most scientific cultures. Yeah, I use particularly, and I think I've almost probably even run out of time, Shantan. Yeah, so I'll quickly say, flag off a few things that it's important to see what frameworks we use. So for example, I use the critical science studies framework, which is to say that we need to understand this question from psychology, from history, from philosophy, from biology, from neuroscience, of course, and from sociology. Yeah, to bear upon the question, we need to get an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary perspective. What you see often is that we go to a very reductionist, either biological or psychological explanation of who and what is a genius. And in that, there are various complexities which we will see if we have time to engage with those. Yeah. Critical science studies is also informed by movements, yeah, movements for social transformation, movements for egalitarian epistemes, movements coming from environment, pacifist movement, the feminist movements, which question and challenge the culture and the nature of science. Yeah. I also inform myself on the sociology of scientific knowledge, which I will not get into it just now, except to give you just one liner on it. Sociology as a discipline always thought of itself as a science. It was modeled on physics, right? So it saw itself as a science and therefore did not feel the need to question itself in the earlier phase. So whether it was sociology of science or sociology of knowledge, they gave science a privileged status, saying that all knowledge claims will be examined for social determinants like religion and philosophy and ideology and all of that, but science is exempted from that. This changed in the 60s and 70s with Kuhn and Bloor and all the other contributions. But I particularly just want to draw attention to the feminist science studies project perspective, where we need to ask this question of both talent and eminence. Yeah, how does talent of a girl child in the Indian context, how does a talent of a woman scientist in Indian context get treated, yeah, get expressed? And we will discuss this in the question answers. I'm sure we all have a lot to say. I'm sure Shalini has a lot to say. But here we are not talking only about women. We are taking intersectional perspective of talking about women and other marginal groups. Yeah, whether it is religious minorities, whether it is caste, whether it is sexuality. We tend to see in the Indian scientific community, as we all know, a huge population of the upper caste Brahmanical group, largely from Bengal or from the South India. And what happens is we are transforming that, we are translating that idea of the modern genius not just to the individual, we keep transferring it to the caste groups. Or Brahmins are essentially like that, they are more capable. Bengalis are more capable. So there are these kind of crude conjectures made in understanding exceptional talent or prodigious work. We also know what happens to women in the sciences. We know the cases of Rosalind Franklin, how the whole eminence idea gets completely, lost. Yeah, when Rosalind Franklin's actually slides get stolen by Watson and Crick, and Watson and Crick get the Nobel Prize and all of that. That story is very well known to all of us. I'll just end with basically saying this much, that I personally think that it's important for us to start researching and start dwelling on the question of how this social construction of genius needs to be touched. And I think it's important for us to take the discourse from individual talent-based, eminence-based idea to more holistic understanding, sorry, not holistic, but more more wide-based understandings of scientific creativity. I'll end with that, Shantan, and we'll take up some more questions.
Thank you, Geeta. What you essentially did is elaborated the questions and put it out in front of us. The important questions that we need to engage with. Thank you for bringing in the historical perspective. We'll get back to you in some time. But before that, we are starting over with Shalini's talk. Shalini, I've already introduced before. She's a PhD student at the University of Hyderabad, and she'll be talking about her experience of being in science and being from a marginalized community. Over to you, Shalini. Thanks.
Hello everyone, this is Shalini. Like Shanthan said, I'm a PhD student at University of Hyderabad. I work with grasshoppers and I work with someone called Joby Joseph. Thanks a lot for giving me this opportunity to talk in such a space. It's a big deal that I even have a space. So I really want to thank you all for this opportunity. Where I go through, I feel also has a space to be heard. It means a lot, is all I wanted to say. This scientific genius, the idea of scientific genius and its consequences is a very personal matter for me, and I constantly ruminate on these questions, not because, but right now I'm 36 years old, who has not been to a PhD yet, and I have struggles about why I've not been able to finish. Which I'll elaborate on in a
Your
bit.
audio,
And largely today, I'm not going to talk about.
do you hear me, Shalini?
I hear you. I didn't get what you were saying.
Your audio is breaking a little bit. Can you just maybe repeat? Did it break for you also, Shanthan?
Yeah, it did. Maybe it'll be better now. Could you check once more?
Yeah. Maybe you can just start the last sentence of what you said.
Yes. So today on this topic, it's a very close topic for me, to be honest. The idea of scientific genius and its consequences. I place myself at the receiving end of the consequences of this entire concept, honestly. And before I begin, I'd like to show this slide, which has this illustration. It's a part of a paper written by a psychologist and a philosopher, both of whom are professors, who were thinking about this idea of genius effect, or this beam, as they call it in their paper, of intelligence that earlier people thought of are supposed to have, which helps solve a lot of questions, very basic questions, be it science, philosophy, or any stream for that matter. It's very close to me because it captures what I want to say, actually. Very, I mean, the precision of the picture is really wonderful for me. As you can see, there is a man standing, and instead of a head, he has a big star, which represents this person. And as you can see, it's a man. And there is another person shining this star on a ladder, again a man. And below their ground, where this ladder and the man stand, is a woman climbing a ladder, right? And this is the basics of this picture. And what it means to me is that I consider most stalwarts in science as these shining star men, specifically Brahminical men. I don't mind saying this, but because from the way I see it, science is reeking with a lot of Brahminical communities representing themselves, and largely males from such communities are occupying these spaces. And again, if you see on the ladder, no, it's again a man shining the star. And that's exactly how the systems function here, according to how I understand science occurs in our country, at least. Although this picture represents in a very this is for the US population, where they were talking about demographics of how genius effect is associated and with a certain brilliance, and how women and minorities or marginalized suffer from this so-called needed or prerequisite feature that people are supposed to have before you put yourself forward into science or even discovering anything or whatever you want to call it, right? If you see the woman in the picture, no, she's not even bothered with whether she can see anything above the ground, right? She's carefully climbing the ladder, very scared from what I believe, holding her ground, finding her balance, and the goal, which is to reach the ground itself, is not even there yet. You're still on the ladder, and this black panel below, from where she is going above this rung of the ladder, no, that's where I place all the marginalized, all the women. I mean, every person who has to go through a certain set of struggles before you reach the ground level. And This ground where these two men are standing, I think of it as this, meritocracy or the entrances that I'm supposed to give, irrespective of whether I have this beaming genius that radiates out of me or emanates out of me, or that is free to be tapped by anybody who finds me. But that is not the way it happens. I am bogged down with a lot of entrances, a lot of test questions, a lot of interviews. Even if I were to go through all of these obstacles as the way I see them, I still find I'm still in the same space. I don't feel like I have broken out of that, that space, the space where this woman is on the ladder, where she doesn't even have a sure footing anywhere yet. She's still in the process. And despite having had a decade of experience in science, I still feel the same. And I have my own bunch of reasons why it is still the same. But that is where I find myself stationed. And this picture is very close to me, therefore. It defines a lot of problems that I'm going to discuss about. And what I want to say is that, first of all, you have to, if I were to be allowed to illustrate this, I'd also have some more people standing away in the line, closer to the ladder where the woman is climbing, because it's a lot to just get to the ladder alone. In my understanding, because not all of us have the luxury to go to campuses which teach us, or colleges or schools which teach me what all has happened in science so far. Thankfully, I am situated in a city where I studied in a very good school. My parents put me in a very good school because, it is needed. It is needed. And to be honest, my parents already told me much before I ventured into science that they are not going to help me in any which way in about how to go about or navigate this scientific field. In my +2 itself, they told me that, listen, we are not going to be able to help you with this. We don't know anything about what it takes to be in such a space, or how to get into it, or how to sustain yourself there, or what the workings of this space are. All we can do is help you get to this. And if financial requirements, support, whatever, in those lines alone, we are here with you. The rest feels like a big burden. And I valiantly went ahead with that kind of a burden. No, it was very difficult to choose what I think I should do in science, because, to be honest, I was also a student who always liked everything. Everything is amusing. The moment I learned about genes, it was amusing. It changed the way I look at the world. The way, like, everything that I see, every living system that I see, reflects a lot of what I've already learned. And there's much to explore, and there's such a big wide window of exploration which shows up in your undergrad. But the moment you enter a master's space in an institution or in a campus, with a lot of difficulty, I have realized my scientific brilliance or genius effect or whatever is already tainted with a lot of assumptions about me. These assumptions, they come up superficially, either because of the way I carry myself, or the way I communicate, or the way I do my experiments, or the way I think, or what I'm already equipped with in terms of learning something to tackle a scientific question that I think I'm interested in. Right. And there are these assumptions that I should have already known a bunch of things, without which I am in no place to be bothered to be asking a question. And constantly, while after my master's, I went on to, and I constantly felt this sense of no belonging, and whether I wanted to fit in or not, try very hard to belong, I was always told right to my face that your future in science is very limited. In fact, the day I was joining for my master's is the day a person from a political organization came up to me, asked me about my caste background. I'm a Dalit woman, by the way. And the moment I told him this, he told me, oh, you're in biochemistry and you're in master's. You are not going to get any recommendations to apply for a PhD abroad. And I just took him lightly. I got very scared. But let me tell you, at the 4th semester, when I was leaving the campus, and even after I left the campus, The state of affairs is this is the fact. Now I want to talk about what is this genius effect then with respect to me that we are going to discuss. Right? Because despite all of this, because I really love science and because I really loved asking questions about things, about how things are working around me, and I'm very interested, I told myself that, listen, I felt all that you need is this genius effect that people say you should have, and I felt I had it. And I felt that if I were to train myself better, I'll do better. I'll have success in this. But it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case because I went on after my master's. I did not get any recommendations, letters, this, that. So the another way of moving forward, therefore, is to maybe work in a lab. Work in a lab and do some good work, get a publication or get recos from people there. And that also kind of did not work out or pan out for my own self-interests, because I went to a very elite space and I stood out. I stood out in multiple ways, which I can't explain in such a short time, but I stood out. Uh, uh, Everything, like, and I've written about this before, like, there is a certain sense of even, and this is supposed to be being at the most elite space. It is also a space where a lot of genius effect or beaming people are supposed to be sitting together, concentrated in this small space. Now, in this small space where you have also marched in, and you feel you legit right belong in this space, it is throwing you out. It is rejecting you. This constant fight. There is this. I feel there's a glass ceiling, which, like, the ladder is twice as big, or maybe the ladder just keeps going on, is how I feel. Like, and being there, it taught me that I am in no place to be competent to show or flaunt any genius effect I have. With respect to asking for something, with respect to making a presentation, with respect to knowing how to talk, with respect to carrying myself a certain way, with respect to requesting for something a certain way. A lot of these things, these untold things, these mannerisms, which I do not carry. See, my community is, like, they call it quote unquote unsavaged or uncivilized, savage or civilized community. It shows up, it shows up in multiple ways, which also dissuades people from me putting me into their bandwagon, sort of. There's this constant force that pushes me out, I feel. After this instinct in this small 2-year JRF in a elite space, I moved on. I came back to the campus where I did my master's in, and even there, this ghost of this caste which is there, and this ghost of being a woman which is there on my back, like, it's like this, it's like I see myself as Atlas carrying the world on his shoulders. Sometimes, some days are really tough when I see the reasons why I'm not successful, despite maybe having a genius effect, which my genius effect is never going to be tested or asked for, is also something I believe. The sciences have written me off. If anything else, one of my previous professors told me this to my face. There are other ways of contributing to the society other than doing science. As someone who is really looking forward to having a career in science, listening to some sentences of this sort already being dismissive or being discarded from a certain community has no space. It has no space for me. It's constantly what I feel is there's no space for me here. There's no room for me and what I want to do, or what I think is cool, or what I think is doable, So this genius effect for me affects in multiple ways, in the sense that if you look at it from the point of view of caste, class, and gender lenses, I can tell you class-wise, I'm already out of the picture in these groups which are supposed to facilitate my genius, or in these groups, or in these spaces, or in these institutions with their equipment, with all of the jazz that they provide me, are supposed to provide me so I can function like every regular normal person. I am not treated that way. I'm spoken to a certain way. I am expected to behave a certain way. I'm also expected to behave my class. If I were to skip the class, then my mannerisms will give away, superficially speaking. If I were to work on my mannerisms, then my physically, how I carry myself will give me away. And These are the things that I feel I've had to learn a lot more than just do my science, which is what I came to these spaces to do. I came here to do something, and I'm being asked to equate myself or normalize myself with a population which is novice. It's not something. It's like going to a mall, a very very posh mall, where I cannot buy anything. I can only go watch, and it's going to make me feel very like like a fear conditioned rat sitting scared. That's exactly how I felt in this space. In terms of class, this is how it is, and also in terms of caste, the ghost that I have to carry is that I myself have a big burden of proving to myself what I am. Do I even have it? What it takes to do science? Forget about the genius effect. Meritocracy, writing the entrance, getting admitted, getting enrolled into the campus. All of this account as me being.
Shalini?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to let you know that if you could finish in 2 or 3 more minutes, then we have some more time for question and answers. But please finish.
Yes, just two more points. In terms of class, this is what I feel. I cannot rub shoulders with this class. And largely it is populated with the elite. It is populated with the upper caste Brahmins, to be honest. And I don't feel like I belong here. Then in terms of caste, the baggage is even more. Despite getting through your JRFs, despite getting through your entrances, despite talking better, despite working on your PPTs, despite working on a lot of things that help you, by working on yourself alone, you have to understand you don't really have people helping you polish your own scientific genius in these spaces, coming from a space how I come from, right? Because it's not enough to do, like I said, I repeatedly want to say this, it is not enough to do your science alone. It's a lot of other things that are being asked, and maybe a capitalistic venture even, but all of that is not something that easily is at my luxury, at my disposal for me to use. Gender wise, what I feel is that as a woman, I'm already written off. I'm actually a person who's very outspoken, and there is no room for people who are outspoken in science, especially if you're a woman. There is a certain way I am supposed to be a spitting image of Marie Curie, not desire any worldly things, be completely, engrossed in my lab, not have fun. And given the fact that I come from the class and caste that I belong from, I'm expected to do it even more, even more. I mean, whether I need to do it or not is another question. But the fact that I need to be presentable that way, there's a lot of credibility that people expect from me if I were to assert the spaces I come from. So this is so genius effect for me is a in the ladder, it's somewhere in the sky. I am far more down below, just making through few rungs that I could have accomplished so far. And there's still more rungs to be there before I stand next to this man on the ladder, shining the star man here. That's all I would like to say. I hope I've been able to say something that has given some ideas to work on or think about. And also,
Right.
as a neuroscience person, I would like to say this one, as a science person also, this one sentence which has been bothering me quite a bit is that the population is not, our population is not normalized. We are not all equal. So let us not check for our IQs or our meritocracies when we are not equal in the first place. With these inequalities, if you're saying we are going to test because you people are all studying the same way and then expecting that people are going to fare similarly is a very irrational approach to doing science or testing someone's IQ. And the fact that marginalized communities are already coming from certain economy, financial low backgrounds, and a lot of other physical stresses, it is not giving me the headspace or the luxury to sit and ponder on these philosophical conundrums that I'm supposed to do my science. It bogs me down. It bogs me down as a person with mental health issues. Legit, I can tell you, I do not have the headspace to calmly sit and think of greater or bigger or smaller or any fantastical idea whatsoever. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so
Right.
much. Yes.
Thanks a lot, Shalini. That was a very, I don't know, it was a very elaborate mention of your experiences. Before we move on to the question answers, what I'll do is I'll quickly try to summarize what both our speakers did. Geeta, I started with the historical, positioning, contextualizing of the question that we had raised, and then she raised very pertinent questions, drawing a trajectory of how the idea of the scientific genius has evolved through the practice of doing science. On the other hand, Shalini has given us a whole host of experiences and questions to think about, and these are experiences, very interestingly, which are not just shared by Shalini. A lot of these experiences have often come up in various spaces. For example, when I was working very closely with working class transgender women, one of them who was an MBBS doctor practicing before she came out as trans, she mentioned that her scientific career of being a doctor was ruined the moment she came out as trans. And it was because of the inherent discriminations that exist within how science functions. So what I will do is, at this moment, I think we should move on to question answers. And we already have a couple of questions with us from people who had who had mentioned questions while filling the form. And one of the first questions that I would like to ask both our panelists on behalf of Mukund Vasudevan from The Wire is, how can we separate scholarship from scholars when latter are geniuses, in quotes, who've been removed from pedestals for abusing power? The question is for you, Geeta and Shalini, and in case Nandita you want to pitch in, please do. Thank you.
So I got the question as, how can you separate the scholarship from the scholar? Is that
Correct,
the question?
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's like asking, how do you separate the art from the artist? Yeah. Now this is an extremely complex question. I find it extremely difficult to argue for the non-separation. They argue for keeping them separate. Yeah. And yet, so for example, after the hashtag #MeToo movement, a lot of us, for example, face this question: suppose if I know, okay, that Tim Hunt or any social scientist who has been named as a predator, yeah. Now, what do I do with the work? Do I stop using the work? Do I stop teaching the work? Or what else do we do? So these are dilemmas. So I would argue saying that it is impossible to keep the work away from the scientists. But when we know that they are capable of unethical practices, non-inclusive practices, it becomes inevitable to call them out. Because in calling them out, you will also call out the culture that they belong to, which would definitely help you to restore the balance of justice, if I may say so. But I would push the question further a little bit and say that we need to critically start engaging with how the social location of a scholar impacts on the kind of work that they do. Yeah, it's very important, the kind of things that Shalini, for example, has been talking about. Why do we privilege a certain kind of abstract work? And why do we privilege a certain kind of abstract testing of intellect? Yeah. Why do we privilege these things? Why do we do work which is the glorified work is in mathematics to be number theory? Yeah. Why is knowledge so constructed? The social location of caste in India, for example. Yeah. So I think this whole question about the knowledge and the knowledge maker is a deeper question. I think it is important to keep the connection between the two alive. About them being on pedestals is a very different question. It's exactly what I was trying to say, that they're pursued. In fact, today in the genius culture, there's no talent, there is only struggle for eminence and awards. Who has this award? Who has that award? That way of wielding power, right? And that power that you wield because you are a scientist can always give you the clean sheet. Yeah, oh, he's a genius, so it's okay. It's okay if he is a wife beater. It's okay if he's a predator. It's okay if he's this. It's okay. Is that his genius and his work is to be preserved? That is where the problem arises. I hope I've answered that question, Shannon.
Thank you. Shalini, do you have something to add?
I power is performance, I feel. And a lot of people who want to perform would want power. And scientific removing the displacing the art from the artist or scholarship from the scholar. I want to say I have no place to comment on this. I am struggling to get my scholarships and be a scholar at the same time. And that in itself, I explained a lot, I believe. Yes. Because my scholarship and my scholarliness or what I want to do has something else in it altogether. My questions are not based on power yet. I don't even dream of power or pedestals yet, is all I want to say for now.
Right. So,
There's a question for Shalini specifically that I've just sent to you, Shantan. Do you want to read that out?
right. Um, yeah. In your experience in the University of Hyderabad, Shalini, which has strong departments in the social sciences, gender studies, and so on, and given some of the turmoil that the university has seen in recent years, do you think students and faculty who have studied, for example, the caste system in India, are more open to critique the idea of merit or genius? If you want me to summarize the question, Shalini, I can do it. It just says that in a campus space like the University of Hyderabad, what do you think people who are more accustomed to the knowledge of caste and merit debates that have happened, and in the context of what has undergone in the University of Hyderabad, I'm assuming that the person is talking about the Rohit Vemula incident and what followed. So do you think people are more accustomed to critique the idea of merit or the genius? Shalini, over to you.
Yes. Um, I don't, I, I'll just talk about my personal experience here, because I do not want to give a generic understanding of what happens on campus yet. Because although I can, it's just that right now I'm not in life sciences. I belong to a department which is a standalone center, which is cut off from life sciences. But I can tell you this much that uh, I recently had to shift my home space. I had to shift to another house, and it just turned out that it is a house that belongs to a faculty member from campus. And while talking to this person, he asked me if I am a merit student. Right. Are you a merit student? Some 3 to 4 times I was asked this. And as a means of explanation about why he's asking this question, he gave me a 5-minute, 10-minute explanation also why he feels this is legit and required. Because the moment I told him whose student I am and what I do, it wasn't very difficult for him to place where my political standpoint is, or where what I subscribe to in my head about caste politics or other things that have happened in the campus. So despite all of that, him asking me that question reflects a lot for me on a personal level. That yes, people are willing to discuss, but maybe to make themselves look better. You know, this whole quote unquote looking good, right? The culture of looking good happens on campus. The culture of looking, condescension if someone speaks on these lines, especially if you come from the community and want to have a discussion in groups, mixed groups. It can be faculty and students, it can be students, it can be a lot of these things. Generally, unless you are very invested into activism or in student politics, such discussions are always thought of as not required, or like, oh my God, this is becoming too much. Let's not talk about this. Or people generally end up saying some aphorisms of, like they'll use aphorisms and they will use something nice to talk about, some neutral statements, and like skip on. As such, I've very few who are friends who are very vested in these issues, especially from social sciences, like humanities and arts. do discuss. But beyond this, I do not see much change in the way things have happened on the campus. If anything, I feel people are more charged up about these things. And if anything, if they see any issues that might crop up, then they will try to subside or alleviate the situation by using some other mechanisms. But as such, I don't see much reforms that is expected. I hope I've answered the question.
Thanks, Shalini. You've answered it beautifully. Thank you. Geeta, we have a question for you. The question says, Geeta talked about the construct of a genius, generally male, who is destined to attain inevitable success. How does the discourse about merit and excellence help in this construction? How does it connect to the contemporary caste merit debate in the country?
Yeah,
Do you want me
yeah.
to repeat the question?
If I get it wrong, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I was trying to say, that it is not only about individual geniuses and understanding how individual genius works. Yeah, genius has now become a sort of a culture, which, as I was saying, gets translated into these ideas of merit, right? And as Shalini was saying, Jayashree's work has spoken about how this idea of merit needs to be problematized. Yeah. And the idea of just, frankly, number. Yeah. That number indicates excellence. Your score in competitive exams, the number of papers that you have published, the number of, so it's all becomes, so there is a link between creativity, productivity, and the special case of genius. Yeah. So I think a lot of us have now started focusing on productivity. Yeah. The more productive, the better journals you publish in. Yeah. Quote unquote, whatever they are, how you network. So what Shalini was also talking about is that there are these boys clubs, right? And there are these boys clubs which exclude women, but they definitely exclude other men also. Yeah. So these are these coterie cultures that develop in the kind of capitalism. So you're absolutely right in saying that there is a connection between this whole making of the genius culture and the making of the excellence and merit culture, which is often deployed to actually keep out people from marginal locations. Does that sort of answer, Shaintan, or is there a part of the question that I missed?
I'm sure it does. It does answer the question. No worries about it. Geeta, thank you. We have one
We
last
have,
question that I'm sorry, Nandita.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering if there is one question about the media's role,
Yeah, that's
which
what
I was, yeah,
I was
I
wondering.
just
I'll
wanted to,
ask it to you.
yeah, that's an option. I was also wondering whether I see that Mukund Vasudevan, who is the science editor of The Wire, is here. Yukti, is it? Maybe I hope Mukund is okay with it, but can you find out if we can pull in Mukund to answer this question?
Yeah. And in the meanwhile, I mean, what I majorly forgot to mention is our introductions. I am Shayantan. I'm the project coordinator for this season, and Nandita, who sat through the call, is the co-founder of CLOS and is an integral part of the editorial team of CLOS. While Mukund is being brought in, I thought I'll correct this thing that I missed out, a very important thing.
Yeah,
Is
thanks.
Mukund here?
Mukund is here, but I'm just checking. Is there any other question we can take? Yeah, there is one actually by, just give me 1 second. While Yukti just looks into that.
I tried to
This question.
I've tried to answer some questions in the chat, but I'm not sure whether I.
Yeah, that's also, we can do that also.
Also,
yeah, so this is,
if people want to, I mean, whatever questions remain unanswered, Geeta and Shalini, we will send them to you over email. And whenever you have time, please go through them and help us with the answers.
Sure.
Okay, there's also Subhashri Desigan, who's also in the media. Anyway, Subhashri also has a question to Geeta. You mentioned a change in perspective to a wide-based one. Can you de-abstract this and explain how it can help democratize the sciences? Geeta, can you make your own interpretation and answer that?
Yeah, I did type in a quick answer to that question there, to Subhashri's question. But you know, what I was trying to say, Subhashri, is that uh, the genius culture or the discourse around genius is so tightly based on individual and on talent, which is so tightly understood as a consequence and function of something biological, something neurological, something psychological, you know, which we need to sort of break. So I'll quickly say that in the kind of work that I've done, for example, in studying the creative process of a scientist in research, mathematicians, physicists, biologists, computer science, what I see is that we need to focus more on normal science, what Kuhn calls normal science, rather than just on exceptional paradigm shift science, and look at creativity over there. And what I find over there is that all scientists, what I could see when they were talking about their creative process, they talk about three phases. Phase one is where the of the idea comes. Popular representation of this is the eureka moment. You see children, the way they draw about scientists, or you see how we talk about that eureka moment which comes in the mind of a genius scientist. It's always represented as this man with, you know, hair or sticking out with thick glasses, and, you know, in his own socially isolated world, right? Because we want to put forward the model of social isolation of the genius for him or her to gain the solitude which will make him do exceptional, him or her do exceptional work. Right. In practice, actually, what a lot of the scientists actually testified to is saying that in this first phase, ideas generally come in collaboration. Ideas generally come through conversations. Ideas come in conferences. Ideas come at coffee tables. So it's a relational world that gives them ideas. Yeah. It is in the second phase, when they start working on the ideas, that they go into a more private, withdrawn world. Yeah. And the third phase is the idea where they have to disseminate that idea to the community. Okay, and that is an extremely difficult and painful process. But what I'm trying to say is, if we shift our understanding of scientific activity and how science gets done, and we actually pay attention to how scientists do it, we'll probably find a much more broad-based understanding of scientific creativity than we will in this whole genius culture paradigm. I hope, Subhashri, that answers the question, but we can talk further later.
Yeah, I think we have time for, like a very short 1 minute question. Do you
Shanti,
think
do you
so?
think I should just select another question from, there are a lot of questions in the question box, or would you prefer that I answer the media one?
I suggest that you give us some idea about the media question, and then you move on to summarize the session and conclude it, Nandita.
Okay. So I think we should have probably prepared a little bit better if we wanted to pull in somebody from the audience. So I will speak on behalf of the media, because I think maybe I'm closest to it. Also, but Anirudh Tagat, who is the person who asked this question, actually had directed this to the panelists. But I'm going to answer this. They have a small take on this. So the question was, oh, oops. Do you have the
Yeah, so
question with you? Read out.
not right away, but the question essentially meant to say that it was inquiring about the role that the media has to play in the construction of the scientific genius. Like Geeta mentioned, often the media portrays scientific geniuses as men with, weird hair and stuff. So what do you think, what is the role of media in construction of the scientific genius?
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can butt in, the films, like, the films like Beautiful Mind, or the films of Alan Turing, or the films, they represent the life stories very, very problematic at some point, no?
Yeah, I agree. And also, like Actually, this specific panel, we also initially thought about including a science journalist to address precisely this aspect of it, because even in smaller ways, and journalists play a big role in selecting who to quote, who to feature. As the Life of Science, we've been interviewing scientists, and a lot of people ask us, how do you select your scientists? So there's a lot of expectation that the people we choose to feature are the quote unquote geniuses. So I think the media plays a big role, and we have to be very conscious about how we're doing this. And if we want to propagate this culture of hero worship that we tend to do. So of course, one way that we all complain about a lot is the way women scientists are. I'm talking about women scientists are portrayed, which is very different from when you interview a woman scientist. Often the questions are, how do you balance your family life and your work life, and it's not very much as much to do as the science as it is to do with their science and with their scientific brilliance. So these are some ways that places that we have to be very conscious about. And also, I think that we have a responsibility to be really much more wary about the scientists we are choosing to feature, and we cannot afford to ignore, separate the science from the scientists. We should take a decision to not, if we have to, mention a scientist who has been terminated or accused of sexual harassment, for example, even if it's a piece talking about purely science topic about astronomy or about cosmic rays. If I'm mentioning ABC scientist who is an accused in a harassment case, then that should not be ignored. So there are, I think, a lot of small ways that the media can play in lessening this hype over scientific genius. And I couldn't summarize everything properly, but briefly, don't want to go on too much. So Shantan, what we have about, actually we should wrap up in 5 minutes. What would you
Right.
like?
Yeah, I was just in the sense, so what, before we can quickly wrap up, maybe I'll just leave it to the panelists. I'll give, maybe Geeta can take 1 minute and Shalini can take 1 minute to tell us, conclude if they have anything which we couldn't accommodate in the given time slot. Geeta, if you have something that you want to quickly address, it's over to you. Or at least give us some direction.
Yeah. No, I think just opening up this question of scientific genius is an important thing to do. We need to look at it in terms of its mental health consequences on mental health. We need to look at the consequences on social institutions that this kind of scientific genius actually perpetuates. So I, as a sociologist, frankly would, and a feminist would frankly say that the idea of the social genius, scientific genius, is a highly masculinized one, often can become extremely toxic in the way it is practiced within the scientific cultures and communities, and it needs to be destabilized for sure. That's all really that I can think of right now. And I fully agree that the representation of which scientist, is a choice that we also make more carefully.
Right. Thank you, Geeta. Shalini, please. Hello? Shalini, are you there with us?
I'm here with you. So
Right.
I want to again wrap it up saying that Geeta was talking about productivity, and that made me think about how scientific genius has possibly in the contemporary times, it has more to do with let's say, interdisciplinary approaches to asking questions, and carrying all of the subjectivities that we have even in the sciences. And therefore, as Geeta has already pointed out, scientific genius in our own standalone disciplines, as I was going through, someone commented on this in an article saying that expecting scientific genius in contemporary times is going to be a big effect, because most disciplines are static by themselves, not really, other than sharpening or making their own disciplines much more better and faster and more effective. There's not much room for genius ideas to evolve out of these disciplines anymore. And it is a space where we now are standing, where we need to sort of start, like things like biochemistry, astrophysics, like these are the kind of spaces, disciplines, which are going to have much more beautiful ideas to give to the world. And in terms of media representation, I would like to again insist that there is no media space for the marginalized or their achievements or accomplishments. And I'm very glad that PLOS is one place where people like me, who's just a student who's not even reached somewhere, has a space to talk about. And I'm glad that more such spaces are coming about, where people do talk about these complex issues that no one in institutions where this genius effect or genius brilliance feature is expected to be there. So that I see as a very promising and very hopeful streak for myself, and I'm sure for most others. Except one problem again is that media as such is actually not accessible to a lot of marginalized, which also becomes a burden when you want to give an entrance, when you want to study more, having the acuity to work on systems, on infrastructures, equipments, etc., available at these institutions, which are largely available in, like, not available at all to a lot of marginalized, also becomes a big deal to show any genius effect if it is there latently sitting in your head, or biologically, or any which way you want to explain it, is all I want to say. So thank you again for TLOS for having this space where these
Thank
kind of
you.
and media are being discussed. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Shalini. Thanks a lot. You really taken the panel to a different level altogether. Nandita, over to you. Please help us conclude the panel.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, after all this conversation, what is even more evident to me is that there seems to be an understanding that any radical shift from our obsession with detecting and nurturing brilliance from a young age, it will be detrimental to innovation and scientific progress. So I think that is why there is this shying away from discussing, dissecting and deconstructing merit. But along this way, we become very comfortable with a culture that seems to have accepted that we must enable the ascent of these geniuses at any cost. But we have to ask ourselves, what has this obsession given us in the end? It's given us a scientific space rife with toxic geniuses, an academia that's still so pathetically represented in terms of gender and caste, maybe a tiny subset of technologically advanced population that lives in complete ignorance of the far majority, on whose exploitation is what our luxuries depend on. So we hope that today's discussion pushes us to question these concepts that we have taken for granted. What do we mean when we say brilliant, and what is the kind of progress we are aiming for? And more importantly, who is benefiting from these definitions? So on that note, I want to really thank everybody who has attended, and really the kind of questions, we've got dozens and dozens more of questions, and I think maybe we should pursue this as a separate article, and we will try and get at least some of these questions answered by our panelists for you and post it on our website in the coming days. Uh, and we don't want to end the discussion here. Let's keep it going. So also, of course, thanks to Geeta and Shalini. Even though we couldn't see Shalini, I think her words were so strong and vivid that it really, really struck a chord. Thank you so much, both of you, for really elevating this discussion to what it usually is. And Shayantan, for doing a great job at moderating. and of course India Alliance for giving us this platform and supporting our season 5, and the rest of the Life of Science team who were around quietly listening and supporting us. So thanks everybody. Have a safe weekend, and maybe we'll do this again sometime soon.
Right. And just before we close our cameras, just one more thing that if you have any feedback to give us, please send it to us at labhopping@thelifeofscience.com. And we also have our Patreon page link and our Back Your Science link up on the screen somewhere. If not, you'll find it on the website. So please support our crowdfunding campaign as well, because that allows our team to get some money out of the work that we are doing. Thanks and goodbye.